What's up, y'all? It's good to be here. Um, I've been doing a little research on photo aging, and I wanted to share it with y'all. Pretty excited about this um, because I found some pretty mysterious stuff in here that I was not expecting. And this is a topic that has been important to me ever since my undergraduate, really, because I saw this picture in a textbook. Um, This is a 91-year-old monk here on the left, spent most of his life indoors. And this is a 62-year-old woman who spent most of her life outdoors. And you can see the mega difference here. This guy looks about 40 years younger than his actual age. He looks probably about 51 years old, and he's 91. And this beautiful woman over here maybe looks 40 years older than 100. Right? I saw this picture and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to get some face sunscreen. Um, and ever since then, I had some assumptions about how this worked. And you might be looking at this and be like, there's genetic differences here. Well, I got this guy here. This guy is a truck driver. And, you can see the difference here. So this would be the side, driver's side exposed to the sun. And you can see he looks a lot older on the left side of his face. Even like his eye is all drooping down, it's all discolored and wrinkly and all that business. Okay, so this guy, unless he's a chimera, has genetically different halves. You could see that this is actually caused by the sun. And this is a pretty big kind of societal interest here. Billions of dollars are spent on this in the US alone. $13 billion on anti-aging products and procedures in the US. 40 billion worldwide. And a lot of this could just be avoided by, a little bit of behavioral differences, putting on a little sunscreen. So the promise of all this is like, you can look 40 years younger with just a little bit of knowledge about how this stuff works. But it's fountain of youth right there, okay? But what is actually going on here? Well, our skin, got a little simplified structure of our skin extracellular matrix. What does that mean? Blah, 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 blah. Bunch of science words. Our skin on the outside, it's all dead cells up here. They're called keratinized cells. This is called the epidermis. Epi meaning this little word here means on top or above. I'm not going to write that out. Kind of keep things moving. But epi, anytime you see that in science, it means above. Epidermis, it's the top dermis. Okay? The living cells are down here. These are your basal cells. These are the stem cells. They continue to divide. And then as the cells kind of are replenished and grow up this way, they enhance their cytoskeleton inside of themselves and express essentially a bunch of keratin, which is part of the cytoskeleton. And they're called keratinized cells. They're dead by the time they come up here, and then they flake off, and that's that. All right? So that's all there to protect you. Underneath that layer, that is like the armor, we then have the dermis. And the dermis has a lot, it's a connective tissue, so there's a lot more extracellular matrix or stuff outside of the cells than there are cells. So we've got these little fibroblasts which build the matrix. So this would be like the vasculature here, and these would be the little fibroblasts, and then this would be the fibers in the matrix. So if we zoom in on this, these guys here would be in the dermis or epidermis. These would be your basal cells. And then we've got our fibers all in here with our fibroblasts. Okay? So we got our collagen fibers. These make up the bulk of stuff in the extracellular matrix. Then we have elastin. And both of these are very important in photoaging. Elastin only makes up a few percent of the total fibers out there in your skin, but it has a huge effect. We're going to focus mostly on collagen here, which makes up most of the fibers, but also has a huge effect. Okay, and this is, very important for maintaining proper skin health. Is this balance in collagen synthesis versus collagen breakdown? So the stuff inside of your body at the molecular cellular level is constantly being built and torn down and built and torn down way more than you think. Imagine like if we were watching a time lapse of a neighborhood and the houses last 50 to 100 years. we're watching the time lapse every second is 25 years. Like it's really, really fast how quick this stuff is being built and broken down, built and broken down, built and broken down. Okay, so we have to have this balance of synthesis and breakdown in order to maintain like proper health in many, many different aspects. Okay, so if we look at this same kind of stuff, but a little closer, I love what David Goodsell does with his watercolor drawings. They are magnificent miracles. I wouldn't even call them art, the way that he kind of depicts biology. So this would be like the basal cell, for example, up here. This stuff here, all of this, these would be the connections between this would be the cell membrane right here. These would be the transmembrane proteins connecting to the extracellular matrix. So all of this is extracellular matrix, different fibers, all right? Elastin and collagen and laminins and all kinds of stuff. And then down here we have this massive collagen fiber. It looks like a big bridge cable. It's made up of these smaller little collagen proteins, and we get this huge fiber that is built. Okay, it's massive, and we get these linkers. Look at this thing; it's crazy. Okay, so this is going to be important because it later we're going to be talking about like how sometimes this needs to be broken down so cells can crawl through, or sometimes it needs to be there so cells can crawl at all, right? And you can just see how dense. It's like a plate of spaghetti with like ropes through it, you know, which would be the collagen fibers, and then the spaghetti would be all these other fibers. Okay, so how does light, the sun, UV, actually accelerate skin aging? And this, my original thought, like what I want you guys to do here is drop it into the comments if you have an idea of how this works. Do that before I tell you what my idea was. Hey, put it in the comments. And I'll entertain you in the meantime. Yeah, watch this. I'm gonna get swole, bro. Ooh, look at that massive forearm. Should we call it a 4.2 arm? Because it's so massive. My forearms are tiny. So I have that. Okay. So my initial assumption was, what just happened? Oh no. Okay. Look, I deleted the thing I didn't want to. That's fantastic. This is going swimmingly. Boom, there we go. So my first assumption was that the UV light is directly, damaging the collagen or the elastin. Okay, we'll just talk about collagen. So it's being damaged, and then the cell is like recognizing that damage and breaking it down. That was my first assumption. Makes total logical sense, right? That's what happens with like DNA mutations. The UV hits the DNA, and then it's like thymines form dimers and stuff like that. And then the cell will recognize that and repair that. Okay? Makes total sense. We're getting direct damage. Nope, not at all. That's not at all what's happening. So by putting this together, this is what I found. So UV light is actually creating reactive oxygen species. All right? That is expected, but then these reactive oxygen species, these are things we call oxidants. So you have like pigment in your skin called melanin. Melanin, for example, is going to absorb UV light, and then the electrons in it are going to be excited, and then those electrons will be donated to other things, and now boom, you've got reactive oxygen species. Something like hydrogen peroxide is a reactive oxygen species. Superoxide, it's oxygen with extra electrons. Things like that. And then those molecules are highly reactive. They can bang into your DNA and do bad stuff, or bang into other molecules and break them down, do bad stuff, okay? So the UV light is creating those, but then those are actually signaling, they're a part of a cell signaling pathway inside of cells. So they're actually inhibiting collagen synthesis. So they stop collagen synthesis. So these reactive oxygen species produced by the UV light stop collagen synthesis, they stop signaling for it, and then they also turn on other genes. So they activate genes. All right, so this is a cellular mechanism, right? ROSs are used in other cellular processes as signaling molecules, and we'll talk about that in a minute. All right. And what these genes are, the genes that are being turned on, they're called matrix metalloproteases. It's a big, long word for an enzyme, all right, which is something that allows reactions to occur. What do these guys do? They break down collagen. Okay, so now we've inhibited collagen synthesis right here, and then we've activated collagen breakdown. All right, that's what is going on with the UV light. That's what's happening with photoaging. All right, so chronic UV exposure disrupts collagen homeostasis or collagen balance. So we're going from low UV exposure, which is, we got these two things balanced. Collagen synthesis good, collagen breakdown's good. We get high UV exposure, and collagen breakdown is like way up, and collagen synthesis is way down in the amounts. So we got a major imbalance here. All right. So what is actually happening is this. Our bodies are actually purposefully eating themselves when you expose your skin to too much sunlight. You could call it sun-induced cannibalism. Okay, it's not just some fluke. This is built into our biology, seemingly, right? There is a signaling pathway that is occurring, two of them at least, from these reactive oxygen species. And this is a way simplified version, just to let you know. We're inhibiting this pathway and activating this pathway. So we're inhibiting synthesis, promoting breakdown. What? Why? Why would our bodies eat themselves in response to sun damage? This is a thinker. I want you guys to think about it. Drop your idea in the comments. What do you think would possibly be going on here? Why would this occur? And now, while you do that, I'll entertain you and myself. By playing the aloe vera. No, this is an aloe vera. This is called, also known as the healing plant. I didn't plan this, but it's right here by my desk. And this guy, if you ever have sunburn, it has all kinds of good compounds in it that regulate the pathways. So they can actually alleviate some of this pathway. Isn't that interesting? Okay. So after you get if you get a sunburn, for example, putting these compounds in will kind of alleviate some of these pathways. Pretty cool stuff. Okay, so why would our bodies actually do this? What the heck is going on with that? Why would our bodies start to eat themselves in response to the sun? Well, I propose to you two hypotheses. Okay, the first is this is a wound healing response, kind of gone out of control. So reactive oxygen species. So again, here we have the skin, the epidermis, and the dermis. And reactive oxygen species are released after we wound a cell. So these epithelial cells, these would be the basal cells, they release reactive oxygen species. And these act as a signaling molecule. This is a part of our biology. And these ROSs do a lot of different stuff, and this isn't even a complete list. First thing they do is they recruit neutrophils out of your vascular system to come fight bacteria. So these are immune cells that will go explode and release enzymes and do all kinds of stuff to kill infectious bacteria. Okay. The other thing it's doing is it's activating another set of immune cells. So we have these monocytes, which are then activated through ROS signaling to become different types of what are called macrophages. Okay, so these guys are now macrophages. And there's different types, and these ones are going to, M1s or macrophages, ones are going to promote inflammation, also engulf bacteria and eat them, and promote angiogenesis, which is the stimulation of new blood vessel growth here to kind of feed this tissue. Okay. The other macrophages that are going to be activated are kind of going to turn this stuff off. So they're going to turn off the inflammation, which is like a bunch of signaling and like fluid leakiness to allow immune cells to come. That's what inflammation is. Reepithelialization. So it's going to kind of create new cells here to close up this wound. Okay, so these are like the first guys and these are the second guys. Turn it on and shut it off, guys. Okay, and then third, what also is happening is what we just saw up here. This is happening also. So we're having the breakdown. We're having reactive oxygen species affect gene regulation to turn on MMP genes, matrix metalloprotease genes, enzymes to break down the ECM, the extracellular matrix, the collagen fibers, so that these cells can crawl through here. Because remember, it was like super dense, right? It was super dense. Like we got to like cut some of this through. We got to make little paths so that these guys can get through here. Okay, so that is going on in wound healing. Okay, that promotes cell migration and tissue remodeling. Okay, so is chronic sun damage, photoaging, just the result of like a chronic wound healing response? That makes sense, right? So it'd be something like this. So photoaging, or like a normal wound, it's like having an alarm, and like let's say you got in the sun, you get burnt once. Okay, that's like the alarm system in your body's now going off. These ROSs are activated. These would be ROSs. Boom, 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 your little alarm system's going off. Cool, not a big deal. We could put out that, we had a little kitchen fire, let's say we could put that out. Well, let's say we just keep going out in the sun and keep going out in the sun, so the alarm is on all the time and it never shuts off. Well, then we might just eventually like burn that house down, right? We're just going to destroy it because like this alarm system is going on all the time. So we're just going to keep degrading it. Let's just tear it down by setting the whole thing on fire. Okay, so this is one possible explanation for what is going on with photoaging. All right, it's a chronic wound response. So the alarm system's going off all the time, and that's creating this photoaging, this degradation of the extracellular matrix. Okay, so there's a pretty cool review article on this, and I'm going to post 3 papers in the description of this video for you to check out. The first one is going to be kind of like the seminal paper that had these findings, all right, showing all this. It also talks about retinoids, retinol, and how it can reverse this process, as well as stuff like aloe vera. Then I'm going to post this paper, which kind of looks at this question is, can reactive oxygen species from UV stimulation actually be used medically to promote wound healing, so to increase wound healing times, right? So if we have a wound, like in this case, and then we shine light on it, we would potentially release more ROS, increasing this response so that we have faster wound healing. So this is very important for like, long-term wounding that can't be, sealed long-term, like surgeries that are done long-term and then they have these wounds that won't close up. Can we actually stimulate wound healing to be faster or to be more robust, depending on what our needs are? Okay, so it's a pretty interesting thing. I'll drop that paper in there for you to look at. It's a review that looks at a lot of different papers. Okay. Second hypothesis, why would we eat ourselves in response to the sunlight? And this one is fascinating. So I saved it for the end. This one is mind-blowing stuff. Why would we eat our own bodies in response to sun damage? Okay, this one's pretty cool. So, is it actually an evolutionary protection mechanism? Natural selection. So if you have increased UV exposure, you also have an increased risk for melanoma, cancer. Cancer cells are just cells that have divided rapidly and they're out of control. All right. And this is a normal melanoma here, and this is an invasive melanoma. Okay, so if we have chronic UV damage, and melanomas, what they do, or they need a robust collagen network to become invasive. Okay, so this can only be invasive if it has those big fibers to crawl along, right? It's got to pull itself along on those. Okay, so we've got these little cells breaking away, and as well as the whole tumor becoming invasive. And it can do that because it has this robust collagen network. All right, but if our UV stimulation from chronic sun exposure, which is already increasing our risk for cancer, for the tumor to form, is also then stimulating the breakdown of the collagen network, a weak collagen network will actually inhibit the melanoma from invading. So by having this photoaging, this breakdown of our ECM, our extracellular matrix, our collagen network, any melanomas that we form will stay in this non-invasive state. And these are not lethal, but these become lethal very rapidly. Okay? So is photoaging actually a beautiful protection from cancer progression? So is this woman's skin actually saying, man, I'm protected from all these other melanomas I have increased risk for now from being out in the sun? It's a pretty fascinating idea. It's pretty cool. And the idea behind this biologically would be something like this, the analogy. Like out in forests, what we'll often do is do a controlled burn where we burn all the underbrush that's dried out, so that the larger trees and things won't be susceptible to future wildfires. So we'll do a controlled burn and burn all of this underbrush down here, so that in the future, like if like lightning strikes or something like that, or somebody flicks a cigarette out of their window, we won't have as great a risk for wildfires. And that's essentially what's going on here by kind of it's like our bodies are doing a controlled burn of the collagen in the dermis to protect from the cancer, because we already have so much UV exposure. We're at increased risk for cancer. Pretty cool stuff. Okay. And so this is the article that I have on that. So, and it's a beautiful article where they look at this in many different ways. Very nicely done, very robust. And they actually show that, like, yeah, patients have a greater life expectancy if they have like this UV damage, like chronic UV damage. It's wild stuff. So I hope you found that interesting. We looked at a lot of different things. Started off with just like simple photoaging, right? So that's personally important to me. Like, I've used sunscreen on my face ever since I was like in my 20s, and I saw this picture. Learned some basic biology here. Had this interesting assumption, right, that I had, which I found to be wrong, and that collagen is actually not being directly, I mean, it could be, but it's not the main mechanism here that is like collagen being damaged. Nope, this is actually a cell signaling process where our bodies are choosing to activate these enzymes to break down the collagen fibers through this signaling pathway of ROSs, showing this disruption in homeostasis. We got this, self-eating. We think of photosynthesis. This is photodegradation, photocannibalism, right? Photoautophagy, self-eating. Pretty interesting idea. And this can be used to promote wound healing, potentially. It's or maybe it's just hijacking this wound healing response, and it's a chronic wound healing response. And then finally, is this actually a beautiful protection from cancer progression? And some pretty crazy stuff. Hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.